In Sierra Leone's tropical jungle, Rocky Mountains are covered in a canopy. The variety of plants and animals in this area are so diverse that listing them would take several videos. On April 23, 2006, American subcontractors were working on completing the nearby American embassy and were allowed to go to the Tacugama Chimpanzee Refuge, which was an intriguing opportunity. Following their neighborhood friend and tour guide Melvin Mama, Alan Robertson, Gary Brown, and Richie Goody hail a cab. The crew enjoys the jungle as it passes them by as they speed down the country road going to the sanctuary. The route is well known to the taxi driver Isa Anu despite the road's poor condition. And the lads are in for a big surprise as the car pulls onto the road that climbs the hill to the shelter. The chimpanzees at the refuge have been observing the caretakers of the sanctuary without their knowledge for a while now, especially how they open and close their cage's gates. The chimpanzees have observed the procedure in enough detail to know how to operate the doors and the gates now. The chimpanzees escaped just before the contractors planned to pay a visit, and they have since crowded the refugees' gates and staff. 31 chimpanzees were encircling the sanctuary, and they were not pleased. Some of the chimpanzees have witnessed their parents being killed, or being made to take part in psychological or medical studies. As a result of that, they don't generally have a positive attitude towards humans. Even though the refuge was there when they were shielded from their previous traumas, they were not about to go back to their enclosures. A huge male chimp by the name of Bruno was the largest one in this sanctuary. To be truthful, Bruno's life had hardly been simple. He was a sick young chimpanzee that was bought for a mere $30, and the refuge was established upon his arrival. Following a land gift from the government, the refuge accommodated 24 chimpanzees in less than 2 years. The sickly boy who had been bought for $30 was now a 270-pound monster of an ape, and unquestionably in charge of his own pack. The subcontractors could see movement in the trees off the road leading up the hill as they got closer to the refuge. Bruno was the troop's alpha male, which meant that he not only managed the politics of winning the elders' favor, but also served as the group's top protector. Not always the biggest and most aggressive guy leads the troop of chimpanzees. Even if an extremely strong male beats up, kills, or threatens all of his competitors, if the Chimp Society's elders don't like him, they might not back him into forcing them into subjection. But this time, everybody adored Bruno. As the foreman's car approaches from the side of the road, Bruno jumps out of the jungle canopy and into the road in front of it. The Americans in the car start looking for their cameras because they think they're seeing a gorilla. The taxi driver Isa instantly starts to back the car down the road after putting the car in reverse. As a native of this area, Isa and Melvin know the power that a chimpanzee possesses. It is said that the male chimp the size of Bruno would be 10 times stronger than a heavyweight boxer. The automobile and its occupants witness Bruno's massive muscles ripple as he moves towards to attack their car as they reverse along the road. Bruno quickly passes the reversing automobile thanks to his remarkable physique, which was not just for show. As Bruno runs to the cab driver's window, he reaches out and effortlessly tears off the mirror. After tossing the side mirror off, Bruno moves around to the car's side. Bruno blows himself up into the back seat of the car through the rear driver's side glass. He moves so swiftly that he appears as a dark blur of biting and screaming. When Isa shifts the car into forward gear and presses the accelerator, Bruno directs his rage at Melvin in the back seat. The vehicle jerks into a stop, peels out, and changes course. Due to the change in velocity, Bruno falls out of the back window. But Melvin is incredibly pulled out with him. His pals observe Bruno standing next to the car with much of Melvin's hand in his mouth as they hold him to prevent him from being pulled out. Melvin ultimately manages to shake the enormous alpha from his hand, but in the process, he loses 3 fingers and approximately half of his palm. Gary Brown removes his shirt and he encircles Melvin's hands, remaining fingers. Isa decides that they have to head to the fence to be protected for the chimpanzees and accelerates up the hill as the refuge gates close up ahead of them. While the other men in the car are attempting to urge him to stop, the car forcefully crashes into the gates. briefly knocking several of the men out. Bruno and his troop are starting to surround and approach the car as it currently just sits inside the gates. Brown regains consciousness as the other passengers have exited the vehicle and are already beyond the gates, leaving only Melvin and Gary inside. Gary immediately is raging in anger as he exits the car because he can hear Melvin screaming for help outside. He starts to yell at Bruno when he finds him standing over Melvin. This is a clear challenge to Bruno, who rises to his feet and charges Gary. Bruno screams and he yells in wrath and he jerks his head back and forth. Gary grabbed a large tree branch with a fork at the end of the road just as he got out of the car a few moments earlier. The chimp shouted in hatred as Gary drew it for his protection and prepared himself for the duel of his life with Bruno. As Bruno charged, he lifted his head and chin high while shouting, giving Gary a perfect target for his forked branch. Gary yells in response, and the two fiercely close the distance for combat. Gary thrusts the forked end of the branch into Bruno's throat as the two sprint at one another, lifting the enormous chimpanzee off the ground and slamming him onto his back. Gary turns the branch around and starts repeatedly driving the blunt end into Bruno's ripped torso. And suddenly, the chimpanzee vanishes. He climbs out from under Gary and slunks humbly into the forest while Gary pursues him. As soon as they enter the jungle, Gary stops pursuing Bruno, since, in his own eyes, Bruno had been tarnished by Gary, and is now acting submissively towards him. Gary locates the other two Americans and tells them to hurry to the road and call for assistance. When he asks them where Issa is, they respond that he just scaled the fence and he was already running down the road. As instructed by Gary, the two Americans stagger down the road in search of help. He then turns to Melvin and starts examining his injuries. Now that Melvin's foot has been wrecked, most of his hand is also missing. Bruno was ripping and tearing Melvin's foot with his hands and crushing it with his mouth as Gary got out of the car. All that remained was a twisted mass of drooping skin, tendons instead of a leg. Gary puts his shoulder beneath Melvin's and throws his arm over his back as they both stumble along the road. Gary can hear the chimpanzees screaming and yelling as they surround them in the trees. Now, they aren't coming out of the canopy, but they are loud and they are angry. When Gary turns to see where he left Bruno, the enormous chimpanzee is still sulking by himself. Gary and Melvin spot an army truck coming their way as they travel a short way down the road. The soldiers assisted in loading Melvin into the back of the military truck as they sped for the closest hospital after the two guys who had fled were successful in locating assistance. As Melvin is getting medical attention, a car pulls up, and Gary sees a deformed mass of humanity in the trunk. The man's jaw had been torn from his face. Both hands and both feet have been torn or bitten from his body. His genitals have been bitten off or torn off as he was disemboweled. Gary asks the male nurse what happened to this guy. And, well, the response wasn't what he was hoping for. The man said, "This is Issa, the cab driver. See, the chimps had caught up to him as he fled down the road, and they ravaged him. Might have survived if he had fought like Gary." Bruno was one of the 4 chimpanzees that did not return out of the 31 that escaped. 27 did. It vanished into the jungle with his tiny group of devoted companions. The number of chimpanzees in Sierra Leone is now estimated to be at 5,000, down from an earlier estimate of 20,000 in the early 1970s. Currently, 100 chimpanzees are housed at the Takugama Chimpanzee Refuge. And the only reason why Melvin is still alive at all to tell this tale is that Gary was brave enough to stand up to this giant animal. He saved a life that day. He turned into a hero.